This video is going to go over the best relics for Ancient Inheritance. I decided to do it separately because I realized that it's not going to change from season to season because the relics always stay the same. So it's better to just have this one full video and I'll know that I didn't miss anything and I don't have to re-record it every single time. The one thing though is if we go to a completely new AI format, like when we went from Aekhir's Temple to Ancient Dragon's Tomb, the relics will change and this video won't be relevant anymore. So do make sure that you are still in Ancient Dragon's Tomb format when you're watching this in the future. And if we aren't, then you should look for the newer video instead. So I'll be going over all of the best relics. You can see a quick tier list here, just for people to refer to very quickly. And I'll go over every single relic, what they do, why I think they're good or bad. And then at the end, I'll also go over my usual path for going through AI and what order I pick up the relics in. So let's start off with level 1. At level 1, when you first enter Ancient Inheritance, there will be 3 relics for you to choose from. The best one by far to me is Exploration Journal. This gives you a 30% chance to double your EXP gained, which is a little bit RNG because sometimes it won't proc. But in general, it's on average 30% extra EXP. This is the best starter relic to me because getting EXP is really, really useful. When you level up, you'll get more provisions, you'll get more relic slots, you also get more unit slots to enlist. So hitting exploration levels is really important, and this helps you do that even if it's a bit inconsistent. Also, the other 2 relics I just don't think are that good, so you should definitely pick this up when you first start off. Next up is Portable Telescope. This lets you select a tile to provide sight near the selected area twice a day. So there's a couple of reasons I think this is really bad, because you would expect that, okay, you could use this for scouting. The problem is that there's 3 types of vision in Ancient Inheritance. There's fog, guild sight, and then true sight is, I don't know if that's the official term, so that's what I have it as in my head. So true sight is vision areas that you've seen before. These areas will be just completely visible. It'll be like clear light, you can see everything. And then there's guild sight. Guild sight is gray vision. You can see the tiles, but you can't see anything that's on it or in the areas around. And this is areas that somebody else in your guild has seen already. And so it's been revealed. And then fogged is pure black. You just can't see it. Nobody's been in that area. You can only use telescopes on guild sight. So the area that you would be revealing would be an area that somebody else has seen already, which I think is pretty pointless because somebody else has seen it, so you're not really going to need it. And there's a relic later that lets you teleport to areas that you've seen before. But the problem is that in the current AI format, there's teleporters that unlock really, really early on. So there's not really much of a point to using the telescope plus the other teleport relic to teleport around when you could just use a teleporter and free up 2 relic slots instead. And also, it's not really useful for scouting or anything, I think, because we have an updating map. So you could just check the map and that would also tell you what you need to know. So I think Portable Telescope is just completely useless because all of the benefits that it provides aren't very useful. If you could click on fog and use a telescope, then it might have niche usage for early scouting. But since you can't do that and somebody would have already seen the area that you're trying to reveal, I don't think this relic has any use. Next up is Wolf's Gauntlet. So Wolf's Gauntlet is if you're fighting something that's a higher element level than your highest element, you'll get 1 Tundra Blessing level. Tundra Blessing just increases your damage dealt, and there's 3 levels to it, 15, 30, 50%. I think this is kind of useless because it would mean that you're under-leveled fighting whatever you're fighting and you generally just want to be on level. It's not too hard to level up unless all of your guildmates are like hogging the light and dark mobs and you guys don't clear properly, but this isn't going to really have good usage. And Tundra Blessing caps at 3 and it's not very hard to hit level 3 anyways. So I'd much rather take Journal and just get the EXP. So that's it for the starter relics. And then at levels 3, 5, 7, and 9 for your exploration levels, you will unlock more relic slots and you can pick up more relics. At those 4 levels, you'll be able to pick from a pool of a bunch of relics, and you can actually swap out your starter relic as well. So let's go over all of the relics, which I've sorted into different categories. First up is Bronze Ring, which is S tier. Bronze Ring, where your character at the start of AI can move 2 tiles in 1 click. You have a range movement of 2 tiles basically. When you hit level 4, that becomes 3. And then there's also a relic later on that increases your movement range by 1 cell. And what Bronze Ring does is any battles or objects, basically anything that you can interact with in your movement range, you can interact with without having to actually stand next to it as usual. So this basically lets you save a lot of provisions. Like let's say you're walking around the map and there's something that's like 3 tiles away. You can just click on it, interact with it, and not have to use the provisions walking there and then walking back to wherever you were. Another similar one is Wooden Doll. Wooden Doll changes your movement from walking to teleportation at the cost of 2 provisions. This is useful once you hit level 4 because at that point your movement range would be 3. So you could teleport 3 tiles and only use 2 provisions instead of the 3 that you would normally use. So at that point, every single time you move, as long as you're moving the maximum range, you would save 1 provision. And then if you pick up the next relic, Vitality Brew, which increases your movement range by 1 cell, then you would save 2 provisions each time you move because you would move 4 tiles and only spend 2 provisions. And then of course, like I just mentioned, Vitality Brew increases your mobility range or movement range by 1 cell. So at level, like I said, at level 2 or at level 1, you have 2 tiles. Once you hit Exploration level 4, you get 3 tile movement, and Brew would make it 4 tiles. And this works really, really well with Ring. Gives you 1 extra range to interact with objects and battles. And with Doll, it gives you 1 extra movement range, so you would save 1 extra provision every time you move. So it's really good synergy with those two, but it does have the issue that if you do not have those 2 relics yet, or at least 1 of those 2 relics yet, then Brew is completely useless by itself. I wouldn't pick this up until you've gotten 1 of the previous 2. And then for the last mobility relic, there is Wanderer's Pipe. This relic you can click anywhere on the map that you have true sight of. So there's 3 types of vision. There's Fog, the completely black one. The grayed out one is Guild Sight, which is somebody has seen it, and you can't TP to Guild Sight. It has to be somewhere that you've been before, so just normal vision. And if you click on it, you can TP there for the cost of 5 provisions. So this one varies. I have it in A tier. I think it can be S tier for certain people, but there's a couple of issues with it. One, it requires you to plan out your route really well, I think. Because it costs 5 provisions plus it costs a relic slot, right? So in order to actually make use of it and have it be more valuable than whatever other relic you're picking up, you have to actually make sure that you're saving a lot of provisions for it. And especially considering that we have teleporters that you teleport around, you'd have to make sure that you'd be like, let's say you're going somewhere that's like a far corner of the map and then you're teleporting back to the boss. Some things I've done with this frequently where I would go walk around, do a bunch of leveling, and then use the Wanderer's Pipe to teleport directly back to the boss and hit it. So something like that could be useful, especially for the Wardens, which are a little bit more out of the way. I would say that if you do not want to think that hard about Ancient Inheritance, then don't get this relic. It is kind of fun to teleport around, but if you're trying to get value out of it, it requires a little bit too much thinking for most people. And also, if you are on guild chest duty, this relic can be useful. It does depend a little bit on what the layout of the guild chests are, because sometimes the guild chests are just directly behind a mob, no space next to it. You have to kill the mob to get to the guild chest. And then sometimes the guild chests are just in like a little area by themselves, hidden behind a bunch of mobs, but there's space around it, so you can kind of just teleport to the guild chest, grab it, and teleport out the next day. So if it's on a map where you can do that, the Wanderer's Pipe can be really useful for whoever is going around grabbing the guild chests. Next up are the battle relics. So for the battle relics, these are any relics that affect something related to combat. These 2 I'll talk about together. There's Ancient Shield and Conqueror's Flag that basically do the same thing. Ancient Shield makes it so when you win a fight using 3 or less heroes, you decrease the monster's health by an additional 1. And Flag is the same thing, but without the condition of using 3 or less heroes. So just anytime you defeat a monster, you reduce it by 1. The important thing about these two is that they actually double the amount of EXP and rage you get. And this happens even if there's only 1 heart left. This means that when you hit zone 2 and 3, they have 4 hearts. So what would actually happen is when you hit it one time, if you have both relics, it would drop to 1 HP, and then you would hit it again, and you would get 3 hearts worth of rewards for only dealing 1 heart worth of damage because it would die. So that overkilling on the mobs is actually really nice because it lets you get a lot more EXP than you would expect. This also helps a lot with just leveling. You save a lot of provisions. If you really think about it, every single time you hit a mob with, let's say, just Flag, you would save 5 provisions because you would be getting 2 battles worth of EXP. And if you have both of these, then every time you hit a mob, you would save 10 provisions because that's 3 battles worth of EXP when you're only doing 1 fight. And also because units can't be reused after you use them, this does also mean that you're basically using that unit 2 or 3 times per day. So these are definitely the best battle relics for leveling just because of how much provisions they save and also the technically reusing units each day. For that reason, this next relic, 4-leaf Clover, I think is completely useless. When winning battles against normal monsters, you have 50% chance to prevent heroes from being unable to fight. So sure, if you proc this every single time, it could be really useful. But the problem is that, like I said, Flag and Shield, to me, are technically reusing units. If you hit a mob with Flag, you've technically used that team twice because you got 2 battles worth of EXP. And then also when you have these relics, you would be gaining so much EXP, I don't think it's necessary for you to go for the RNG chance to prevent heroes from being unable to fight. You would hit like a few mobs in a day and you would have the level that you need already. So there's not really any point in grabbing this, and you better be spending it on a movement relic instead. Next up, we can take a look at Snakehead Figurine. This one makes it so when you're using an object, it increases your Tundra Blessing effect by 2 in the next battle. Went over Tundra Blessing earlier, but it just increases your damage dealt up to 3 levels, 15%, 30%, and 50%. And for Snakehead Figurine, objects would be stuff like chests, even fences, which do cost provisions, but fences, I think even the teleport points work. So basically anything that you can interact with besides battles would increase your Tundra Blessing level by 2 for the next fight, which is really good, especially when you're bossing. Like you could open a chest, go hit the final boss, go open another chest, go hit the final boss again, and it would greatly increase the amount of damage that you deal. So like I said, or like I wrote here, you want to make sure that you leave up objects around the prongo so you can proc this continuously. And also it activates off of hitting fences just because that's not maybe something that people wouldn't expect. And this is S tier just because when you're doing your respawn kills or just killing the bosses in general, because this lets you deal more damage, and once you finish leveling, you don't need shield and flag anymore. It's just definitely the best relic to have in your inventory for the end. Broken Arrow is also S tier because it's pretty trivial to proc. You need 3 heroes of, or you need heroes of 3 or more classes to increase your Tundra Blessing by 1. This combined with Snakehead gives you Tundra Blessing level 3. And then at that point you'd be capped out, and for the same reasons as Snakehead, it's S tier because you're not going to need Shield and Flag anymore, so you can just replace one of those 2 with Broken Arrow to deal more damage when you are hitting bosses. Aekhir's Tome is the last Tundra Blessing relic, which it requires 2 more elements, which I'm not too big of a fan of because it's more annoying to proc for most people, I would say. It's not that like dual element teams don't work. It's just way too much thinking, and Broken Arrow is just easier to use, so I don't see a reason to pick this up. Next up, there is Sacred Charm. So when you're hitting the prongo, you only have 2 chances to hit per day. Sacred Charm would increase this so that you can hit 4 times instead. And I don't think that's that useful because your units can't be used multiple times per day unless you use a statue to revive them. And usually by the time you get to your third and fourth hits, your hits are not going to be very good and they're not going to do a lot of damage. So I would say for general usage, this relic is not good. However, if you are in a situation where you are in a small guild or you're one of the primary carries or something, and you have access to the revival statues, this could be really good for helping your guild get through that final boss, and you can just do more hits in and try to contribute even more than usual. Lastly, there are two relics here. There's Food Supply and Eerie Dish, which I labeled as provision relics, though Eerie Dish might technically be a battle relic. First up, let's talk about Food Supply. I think this relic is actually pretty good. It's really underrated. The way it works is that you can tap your guild members to send 5 provisions twice per day. And this, you can technically think of it as it's just 10 provisions each day that you can send out. For the Food Supply relic, there's 2 ways to use it. You can either click on somebody and then click on this in order to give them the food, and you can also go into your guild log and look at every single person, and you can also just give them food this way instead. There's 2 uses per day, and each person can get at most 5 supports once. So if I use this, you see +1, and now it's 1 out of 5. And then on the other end, once you open up AI and you enter, you'll see that you've received aid from guild members, which is from Food Supply. It's a really good filler relic, I would say, because let's say you're like walking around and you're looking for relics to pick up, especially in the early parts of the game, and you hit like a chest that's like, okay, you have like Sacred Charm, 4-leaf Clover, and Food Supply. You might as well pick up Food Supply so you can at least send out provisions until you get a better relic like Shield or Flag. So that's a really good usage for Food Supply. I pretty much always pick this up if I don't have something in the S tier that I want to pick up available in my selection. And also, if you are somebody who's kind of playing more casually or just isn't too sure what you're doing, this Food Supply relic lets you funnel provisions into your stronger members so that they can have more provisions to run around with. But then, of course, if you are playing optimally and you have your 5 slots already, like you have 3 movement ones plus 2 battle ones, that's your 5 slots already, and there's really no room for Food Supply in that instance. So I would say that if you're in the situation where you have nothing else to get Food Supply, send out your provisions, or you can funnel provisions into your stronger members if you want to. And then there's Eerie Dish. When you completely defeat a normal monster, gain 5 provisions. I think this is just useless because it's kind of too complicated to set up. Like ideally, you would hit something and get 5 provisions for it. And then it's like, you would have to have a trail of like mobs pretty much to hit. And also when you have both shield and flag, you're already level so fast that there's not really any reason to try and save these provisions when you could just pick up something like ring or doll and save like pretty much the same amount of provisions while moving around. So I would say this is pretty useless. There's like some niche cases where maybe like you got your level, you're about to kill a mob and you have literally nothing else to pick, like it's like Tome, Clover, and Eerie Dish. You could pick up Dish and save 5 provisions in that case, but it's super niche. I would say this relic is pretty much like 99% of the time completely useless. And then this isn't a relic, but it's here, I guess I can mention it, that there's certain flags on the map. You can see here in this screenshot actually, which I'll go over in a little bit, but there's white tiles and blue tiles. The blue tiles are typically areas marked by the Mad Dragon's flag, which gives you a little debuff, going from 30, 50 to 70%, and you can cancel this out with Tundra Blessing levels. So that is one way to make sure that these flags aren't debuffing you as much, and it interacts with Tundra Blessing, which is why I have it in the relic info section of this database. And then throughout the map, there is also the Relic Chest, which lets you swap out one of your relics for a different one. And this is basically just rerolls in case you didn't like the relics that you got when you initially hit the level up. Now we can take a look at what my typical optimal relic progression is going through AI. Starting off at level 1, I always grab Exploration Journal. And then as you hit level 3 and 5, you try to pick up Shield, Flag, Ring, or Doll. it doesn't really matter which one you grab first. I'd say probably get one of the battle ones first is more important if it shows up, but whatever shows up, you can just grab it. I would say that though, when you hit level 5, you don't need both shield and flag until you hit zone 2, because in zone 1 the mobs only have 3 hearts, so if you have both shield and flag, you'd actually one-tap it, which is kind of bad, because if you only had one of shield or flag, you would be able to overkill it instead, and you would do 4 hearts worth of EXP instead of getting only 3. So once you hit zone 2, you want to pick up both, but for zone 1, you're going to stick with one for now, and then for your second slot, get one of Ring or Doll. And then of course, like I mentioned, Food Supply is a nice filler pickup if you didn't get anything useful in your level up. Once you hit mid, which I would say is about zone 2, that's when you would have 4 relic slots, and that is where I typically drop Journal. At this point, you would want both shield and flag, because the mobs in zone 2 and zone 3 both have 4 hearts, and having both of these will let you deal 3 hearts worth of damage and could overkill it for 6 hearts worth of EXP. And your second, or your third and fourth slots rather, would want to be 2 movement relics, whatever you prefer really. One of Ring or Doll, and then either the other of Ring or Doll, or you can get Brew, or you can get Pipe. Once you hit zone 3, after you finish getting your 2 element levels to level 10, you'd want to drop off both shield and flag for Snakehead Figurine and Broken Arrow, so you can have your Max Tundra Blessing when you're fighting bosses. And then your last 3 slots would just be some movement options, Ring plus Doll, and then either Brew or Pipe. So that is it for the Relic guide. This is going over specifically Relics, like I said, because this isn't going to change from season to season until we move into a completely new format. If you're looking for stuff like the best units to use, that does change a little bit from season to season as we get more units added to the game. So you can check out the other video for that, and also the link to this database will of course be in the description and the comments.